Today, folks, we're going to talk about the big, beautiful so-called bill that Trump has been basically trying to get passed through legislation that will directly impact us as Canadians that invest in U.S. dividend stocks, because many know there's a 15% withholding tax, but he's looking to increase that. And a lot of it has to do around equalizing trade when it comes to the digital service tax. And it's something I actually have experience in as somebody that sells digital services to the United States. We're going to comment on this and so much more for those that are looking to fast track their financial independence, those in retirement now, and how this will affect you. If you want to join me on your journey as well as me just documenting mine, consider hitting that subscribe button, folks, and let's get right into this.
Okay, so this actually...
Oh, by the way, this is a lawyer who was on BNN this morning. That's what we're reacting to, a guy that actually knows the ins and outs of this.
He could change tax laws that have gone back, I believe, for decades. What effectively is the rate right now to pay on income if you're a Canadian investor in the U.S.?
Well, if you're a corporate investor and you're getting dividends from a U.S. subsidiary, it's generally a 5% withholding tax rate. For individuals with dividend income from the U.S. payers, it's a 15% withholding tax rate.
And if things change?
Well, those rates would go up by 5 percentage points each year, up to a maximum of 50%. But that would take, in the case of corporations, 9 years. So hopefully we'll have this resolved before then.
So again, I think it's incredible that if you understand corporate investing, you already get a massive 10% deduction over the 15% on withholding tax under a corporate umbrella. In a regular account or a TFSA, you're already getting charged 15% on dividends. That's why it's really appropriate to focus on capital gains to some extent, unless you're buying it in your RSP, where you completely get waived the 15% withholding. And apparently this bill will also inflict on RSPs, from my understanding, but the implications here are pretty large, and at least it's not all at once. It will be gradual, but we'll just listen to a bit more here.
Do you feel like it will pass? I mean, it's one of so many things in this huge bill. There have been, arguments about the bill, but I'm not sure that the Canadian perspective is going to be taken into account.
Well, I think that's right. I don't think this provision is particularly
contentious in the
that's
U.S.,
right.
yes.
That's right. Now, having said that, the bill may not pass because there are contentious issues, even among the Republican senators. And second, this one provision involves a tax treaty override. And there is some commentary out there that a tax treaty override rule cannot pass, or there's issues with it passing, under the U.S. Senate's reconciliation rules. So this provision itself might need 60 votes. But that's not clear. It's an issue for the U.S. parliamentarian.
Has this ever been put forward this way? Has the tax rate on American income for Canadians ever been pushed up?
There was a risk of that under the FATCA rules that relate to foreign reporting or reporting of foreign bank accounts and other information. But we resolved that before that became a concern.
So how quickly could this happen if this bill does pass? Are we talking something that would take effect on income from this year, or would it take effect the year after that? Do we know?
The earliest it could apply would be 2026, and that would only occur if this bill were passed before October of this year.
Give me an idea of...
So I just want to re-amplify what he said there, that it could only come into effect 2026 if it passes before October of this year. And again, if you're somebody in retirement who relies on that foreign income, this is something you're definitely going to need to pay attention to. Like my parents, they rely on U.S. dividends to some extent. They are paying a 15% withholding already. And honestly, again, as somebody that is a total return investor, I don't think dividends should be the totality of the way you invest, because I don't think there's a difference between selling some shares and actualizing a capital gain, which is more tax efficient in most cases. But the fact is, this is going to be pushed off for a while, and it's not like an immediate implication. So even if it is something in your retirement accounts, there's no rush on it, and you can kind of just see how this unfolds over time.
Of the hit that some institutional investments could have as a result of this?
Well, Canadian corporations, again, earning income from subsidiaries, they could have their rates going from 5%, increase to 10%, and then 15%. And onwards. It is surprising that Canadian pension plans could also be impacted, although the thinking is that it would only be on dividend income. The changes wouldn't apply to interest or even income from gains on U.S. real property. But some of that is still uncertain, and the bill could change.
Typically,
Yeah, so the uncertainty is what's killing a lot of people because Canadian pension plan has a lot of ownership. I think almost 50% in U.S. assets, and they own a lot of individual stocks like Google and Nvidia. It seems like they're more growth oriented in that aspect of things. And what's hilarious to me is somebody, again, if you don't understand the tax code, it's great to become a sole proprietor or get involved with starting a corporation just because of the amount of tax benefits you can get on a lot of these different investments. But again, that's something that will escalate over 9 years. And I don't really hold any U.S. dividend stocks in my corporation as it is today, but I'm starting to realize it might not be the worst thing if I only have to pay a 5% withholding. I mainly own the S&P 500, Google, Meta, and some of those stocks in my corporate account.
are the pension funds exempt from something like this?
Yes, they're generally exempt from U.S. tax on U.S. withholding tax on dividends and most interest income.
How does it work the other way? And I'm sure there are far more Canadians investing in the U.S. than there are perhaps Americans investing in Canada. But do we have a similar system where they get taxed?
Well, yes, under the Canada-U.S. tax treaty, the rules are set and comparable rates apply, comparable withholding tax rates and taxation of business income apply in each jurisdiction.
So about
rules.
5%.
Yes, in that case. In case of individuals, it's 15% on dividend income.
So
Same vice versa, right?
can you see Canada then having to change its rules? But I'm not sure it would have the same kind of effect. As I mentioned, probably more Canadians investing there than there are Americans investing here.
Yes.
It's possible Canada could change rules. I think what Canada would do is look to...
I mean, just go on like Blossom or some of these social apps and look at people's portfolios. Like most people are buying VFV, they're buying the S&P 500, they're buying a lot of U.S. assets, even in CDRs, and a lot of that is going to start hurting any income that they're collecting off those assets for sure. Whereas I can't imagine most U.S. people are buying a lot of Canadian assets at all.
Some of the other countries impacted by these potential changes, such as the United Kingdom and France, and to see what they're doing and probably play along.
Typical Canadian response. Let's just see how everyone else responds first.
Digital services tax is something that Donald Trump does not like,
what I wanna
very
talk about.
specifically has pointed out and grieves him. Do you think much of what we're seeing here has to do really with that? And if Canada got rid of the digital services tax, the whole thing would go away?
The digital service tax is the main concern. There is another, so if Canada did eliminate it, the issue probably would go away. There is one other issue that Canada's proposing to adopt a rule under the Global Minimum Tax Act that if it adopted would also get us into this issue. But the Digital Services Tax Act is the main concern.
See, the way he says that is the main concern, and let me tell you why specifically. As somebody that sells digital services to the United States, I don't need a green card. I don't have to send product across the border that requires import fees and further tariffs. I literally just sell social media, right? And I get sponsorships and stuff like that. And in Ontario specifically, that's why it's so great to own a corporation where you make U.S. income, because not only is the conversion incredibly favorable right now, I mean, the U.S. dollar is still incredibly high over the Canadian dollar, but I don't have to charge HST to U.S. clients. That gets waived here because typically when you operate a business in Canada, you have to charge the HST, and then you also have to pay the corporate income tax rate, which on the first $500,000 is somewhere between 10 and 12%. It's incredibly small, but when you tap on HST at 13%, you're paying about a 23-24% tax rate. But again, you bring in US dollars, you're not paying the HST, so you're really only paying that 10 to 12% tax rate, which is quite astonishing. So Trump is looking at this saying, like, it's not fair that let's use Google as an example. Recently, when they introduced this digital service tax, and as a Canadian, I think it's absolute bullshit. This is probably one of the few things that I don't think is personally fair, because when I run Google ads and I'm marketing these videos and the products, these digital services, I actually have to pay extra money if I'm marketing to Canadians because I'm using a US tool, which is Google. So if I go on Google Ads and I want to promote my video to Canadians, I'm going to get charged an extra 2.5% because that's what the government is charging Google. And even though I'm a Canadian marketing to Canadians, I'm still using that US company. So they're still charging me for it, even though I'm not marketing to the US. And I can understand, like, it's funny as a Canadian seeing that, but the US just says, hey, if US people want to market to Canada, they have to pay a fee that Canadians aren't really paying to market to the US. But really, we are. I mean, we're not really getting around that either way, but it's kind of a weird law. And I know Carney said he wasn't going to get rid of it, but he probably should, because I'd rather, not pay a 2.5% fee. And I'm sure the US to not have to pay a 2.5% fee just to unlock not having to deal with escalating withholding tax on our investments, right? So this is the thing that Trump is targeting, and it's really interesting.
And the digital services tax, we have our own version, but so does Australia, so does the European Union.
Well, certainly countries within the European Union, like France and the UK. Well, UK is in Europe, but not the EU.
And is the same push happening for those countries to get rid of their digital services tax from the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay. So do you think it's likely? I mean, Mark Carney has stood firm sort of on the digital services tax and companies, American companies that make money here and profit here. What's your take on whether or not that tax is negotiable for the Canadian government?
Okay.
Well, the issue is under the Digital Services Tax Act is one of jurisdiction to tax. The U.S. sees this as their tax base that we're invading, essentially. And
Maybe not wrong.
we think new rules should be developed for the digital economy and the taxation of income in the digital economy. And other countries agree with us. So the OECD has been negotiating.
Now, the reason these other countries agree with them specifically is because when you look at how conglomerated Google's become, I mean, the lawsuit with Apple right now over, search dominance, but they also own Android, which is like the only other major operating system on phones. Like Google's really kind of permeated every aspect of our life along with Meta. Like basically the major institutions, with the exception of TikTok and some other foreign social media accounts, like all of us influencers on these, regardless of where you live, is just flooding that money into the United States. And that's why they're saying Trump's tariffs are complete and utter BS. Like, why are you so focused on products coming over the border when the digital services are what are truly dominating and permeating globally? I mean, except for China, we're not really allowed to enter those markets to a major extent. They have their own social media apps and stuff like that. But still, even when you look at WhatsApp as a global used messenger app, it's like the biggest one next to like Telegram and some of those. But like these companies, how do you deal with that as a foreign entity, right? A foreign government when you're saying like, can we really just allow these mega conglomerates to just start sucking this money out of the global economy and into their businesses? I don't know. That's why I like owning them as a foreign investor. I get a lot of tax breaks to own them, and I see the benefit from owning them. So it's kind of a catch-22 that way, I think.
Something called Pillar 1, a new set of rules for allocating tax jurisdiction in the digital economy. But those negotiations have bogged down. And that's why certain countries like Canada have moved independently with a digital services tax. Hopefully this will speed up that Pillar 1 process, or otherwise there'll be a resolution. I don't think every country is just going to walk away from their digital services tax.
How many countries are involved in the negotiations? Is the U.S. involved in that?
Yes, and about 140 countries have been involved in these negotiations, with the big ones being, our European partners and other sort of G7 countries.
But the U.S. is taking part, or at least they have an understanding or acceptance that perhaps something needs to be done.
The U.S. is resisting change because the tax base given up, about 2/3 of taxes that would be shifted under Pillar 1 would be U.S. taxes that would otherwise be part of the U.S. tax base. So they don't want to give up on that revenue.
Yeah, so they might be dragging their feet a little bit and coming to some sort of reconciliation with the other countries on this.
At a minimum, dragging their feet, yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay, Ron, I got to leave the conversation with you.
I will pass this off to you guys. I'd love to know what you think. I mean, this is a current evolving economic tariff war that has, massive implications on both sides of the border. And I really don't know what the impact is. I feel like eventually governments have to pull money out of somewhere. So Trump's looking at the U.S. economy saying, where's the best places to pull extra tax revenue? Canada's constantly been doing the same. We saw it with carbon taxes they alleviated, but they can't just keep alleviating taxes on everything because they need to generate that revenue, and how they generate it, whether they tax the rich or increase taxes on the poor. It's a really complicated discussion that's really dynamic and changing seemingly like every month right now. But I'd love to know what you think about all of this in that comment section below.